Welcome to Storytime, etc. We try to post scary stories every day, so please subscribe and hit the bell button to get notified. Story 1. True. About 6 years ago, when my cousin, we'll call him James, was 15 and I was 7, our parents left us to go to a wedding. They trusted him enough to babysit me for a while so they could get to the wedding time. It was more of the parents' friends, so we didn't really have to come, and it seemed cheaper to leave us at home. It was sometime in fall, maybe the first week or so of November. He and I were playing games when there was scratching at the door. It was loud and animal-like. Something or someone wanted to get in. James had gotten up and walked over to the door to look at who it was, only to have the door kicked. It was like something wanted to break the door down. James had started to get nervous and he looked at me. He was scared, and today I still don't know why. He was completely silent and he quickly ushered me upstairs. It was only around 7, but it was dark and he insisted that it was my bedtime. He tucked me into my bed and went back downstairs. This was my aunt and uncle's house and they hunted. They had a small amount of guns, and I could tell that when James went downstairs again, he went to grab one of the guns. I started hear loud shuffling outside in the leaves and I called for him to come upstairs. He was up and next to my bed in less than a second with a gun in hand. I told him about what I was hearing outside and how I was scared. He looked outside and said there wasn't anything. By then the scratching and kicking at the door had stopped, but I was still scared by someone trying to get in and hurt us. James stayed in my room and insisted we would be okay. I fell asleep, and from what I know, so did he. At around midnight, the shuffling again, and it was in the house. I immediately started to cry, and that woke James up really fast. He got up and walked out of the room and stood at the top of the stairs. Seconds later I heard him shoot something and a scream. He ran right back into the room and blocked the door with everything he could find. I was still bawling my eyes out and barely registering what was going on. James sat on the bed next to me and tried to comfort me, but I was having none of it. I kept wailing at the top of my lungs. A minute or so later there was scratching at the bedroom door. James grabbed his phone and called the police, with me now trying to push him so he's in front of me. I wanted to be far away from whatever that was. The scratching continued and it sounded like horde till the police arrived. The sirens were the thing to scare whatever that thing was. I don't remember much from what happened, and James only ever tells it when I am not around. This is all I've got, really.
Story 2. This House Possessed, my personal true story. This house possessed. I have always been quite adventurous, so it stands to reason that when I had spare time alone I would hop in my car and go exploring. I especially liked finding old abandoned homes, and there are a lot of them in Colorado. My husband hated the fact that I would do this completely alone, and he was always afraid that I would get into trouble. When I saw "No Trespassing" sign, it was an invitation, so it's no surprise that I would often be where I wasn't supposed to be. One day while out driving down old country roads that I happened upon an old abandoned farmhouse, so I pulled into the driveway. There was no garage or carport, so my car was right in plain sight. This old red brick farmhouse was all boarded up, but around the side of the house there was an opening where one of the boards had fallen off, so I scrambled on up and crawled through. I found myself in a front bedroom. Of course, it was rather dark, but there were cracks in the boards that let in just enough light that you could easily maneuver throughout the house without too much difficulty. Imagine my surprise to find everything still in the house untouched. Near as I could tell, it had been empty since sometime in the 60s, so had been sitting in this condition for at least 20 years. I found this very strange, that no kids had gotten inside to party, nor any evidence of a homeless person, especially since this house could be easily seen from I-25, a major highway that goes through the heart of Denver, and there was an exit within walking distance to this house. Denver had a very large homeless population, just like all big cities have. The living room had all the furniture, lamps, tables, and the bedrooms all had armors and iron beds. Everything left in the kitchen, along with home canned goods, spices, dishes, everything still there. In the bedroom where I entered there was a portable toilet, and I wondered if someone had been sick. I got a feeling that was the case. I spent hours in there just looking through pictures and postcards of the family that had lived there. There was a ton of Catholic paraphernalia too, crucifixes on the walls, rosary beads and the like. It was fascinating to me and I was trying to figure out why this family had left the house this way, and I was so surprised when I came out how many hours had passed, but I chalked it up to being too involved and losing track of time. I've never worn a watch, so it wasn't hard to believe that this could happen. This place also wasn't too far from my house, so I would go there as often as I could and wander the grounds, investigating the sheds and the outhouse. The root cellar under the house was loaded with old canned goods and rotted root vegetables. The smell, of course, after all this time was non-existent, so really it wasn't unpleasant. I kept wondering what had happened there. I did not know that the family that owned this home lived just around the corner on this same street. How I found out was, they caught me there and ran me off. I watched them as they left and saw where they went. Now, when I would go back, I'd look to see if they were home before I'd go in. So, week after week, month after month, I would go back. There was so much to explore. Time after time they would catch me there again and always run me off. I always wondered why they never called the police on me, but they never did. I think they knew I was being haunted, although I was not aware of this at the time. Later on, after I had been exploring for a number of months, I began to find myself there with no recollection as to how or when I had gotten there. But every time I went in, hours and hours would go by, and every time I came out I was always surprised at how much time had passed. I would think I was in there about 2 hours, but would find at least 6 hours had passed and it was dusk. It would begin to get dark and I would have to leave because, of course, there was no electricity. I was completely taken over and got it into my mind that I wanted to buy this house, so I talked to my husband about it, never revealing to him that I had been going there. I kept it a secret from everyone, even my best friend. I did some research and tried to find out anything I could about it. I did find out it was built in 1910, but could get no other information about it. I even tried to talk to the people that owned the house, but they would never tell me anything at all and would just tell me to leave, again. I never damaged anything and left everything as it was. I never took anything from that house until one day, I was drawn to an old green woven clothes hamper in very good condition, and since I needed one at home, I took it. No one would miss it, right? Now, I had made a connection. Bad move. Soon after I took this hamper, I had a dream. Or was it a dream? A figure in a dark hooded cloak approached me and said, "Can I come into you and finish living out the rest of my life?" I replied, "If I do, then when do I can to live out the rest of my life?" And the figure disappeared and I woke up. Creepy, huh? I do believe that the hamper was the catalyst for this event. I should not have taken anything. Thou shalt not steal. There's always a reason for his commandments. The next time I went to the house, it had been completely demolished. The house and all of the outbuildings were gone. There was absolutely no trace of that anything was ever there. Not a brick, not a board, not even the foundation. The root cellar had been filled in completely. I was devastated and wondered how and why did they do this. The house was safe and could have been sold. I had been going there 2 and 3 times a week, so I don't know how this was accomplished so quickly. I wonder if the dream came after the destruction, but I had not known what they had done, and the hamper made it possible for this spirit to come to me. I kept that hamper for a number of years and was always haunted by whatever had happened there. As long as I held on to it, I could not release myself from the spirit that inhabited that house, although I never had any more dreams. I finally did rid myself of it, though, because I knew as long as I hung on to it I'd never be free. I do not remember how I disposed of it, but it wasn't until then that I was finally released, but this had gone on for years. I'm very much more careful now when and where I go, and will stand outside and take the time to size up the spirit or spirits connected to these old places before entering. Please, if you are out exploring and you find a place like this, do not take anything, as you don't know what you are bringing home. And if you have taken anything from a house like this, get rid of it now.
Story 3. True, Paranormal, My Grandmother's Haunted House. This happened in 2011 when I was 7, I'm a girl, now 14, and I just talked to my mother about this incident and decided to share it. So, I lived with my grandmother, father, mother and 2 dogs quite far from any town. The house was big, so I usually play hide and seek with my mom a lot. I don't remember which month it was, so my mom filled me in on this. She said it was October, during the holidays. This one particular day, my dad was out driving my grandma to the hospital as she had an appointment with the doctor, so I was left alone with my mom. After several rounds of hide and seek and watching a movie with my mum, it began to get dark outside and my dad still wasn't home. I've always been scared of potential home invasion, so I was paranoid all day because my dad wasn't with us. He made me feel very safe. Me and my mom decided to play Monopoly. Fast forward an hour. When I was 7, I thought I was very sly, so I kept stealing money from my mom's stash. Now that I look back, she was probably pretending not to see. As I was taking a $50 bill from her Monopoly cash, she said, "The power will go out soon." This left me completely puzzled as I had no idea how she'd know this. But sure enough, it went out about 15 minutes later and I started to panic because, as most little kids, I'm scared of the dark. I later found out that there was a power outage in my area because of a storm and my mum was notified of it. She handed me this Nokia phone and let me play my favorite game on it, which at the time was Doom. She told me to go hide under the bed sheets if I'm scared and that she'll be back soon. I asked where she's going, but she didn't answer. As she headed out the room, she locked the door. I laid under the sheets, killing some monsters on the game for what felt like hours but was probably only 5 minutes. Footsteps were heard in the kitchen, which was next to the room I was in, so I took the sheets off my head and yelled out, "Mom?" Glad that she's back because I was really scared, but no answer was heard. The footsteps didn't stop, so I yelled again, "Mom, can you please come?" I'm scared. After I had said that, the footsteps stopped completely. I got a sudden rush of adrenaline, so I held tight onto the phone and dashed out the room to the kitchen, which was empty. I was left puzzled but didn't wait for long as I ran to the door, unlocked it as there's keys on the inside too, and ran to the corridor. Alright, so the corridor has 4 doors, on the right side, one at the very back which I never was allowed to go in. I later learned that the room was where my great-grandma died and no one touched it ever since. It also had stairs next to it leading to the 2nd floor and one at the front which led to the outside. The 4th door I came through was the closest to the outside door, so I quickly opened the outside door, ready to run out, but the rush of adrenaline was gone and I got scared of the outside too. It was very dark and I was barely able to see. My only choices were, go back to the room I came from. Scream for my mother. I chose number 2 and started screaming for Mom over and over again. I guess I wasn't loud enough because there were no replies. I remember starting to sweat and panic, different scenarios playing through my little head, scenarios like, a murderer killing my mom and coming for me next, or my mom leaving me forever. I know, stupid, but I was only 7 after all. I remember looking down at my feet and beginning to cry. More footsteps were heard, but this time behind me. I looked behind me and saw a silhouette of a tall person. I'm assuming it's a male due to the body build, at the end of the hallway, standing in front of the door. I can't recall what he looked like because it was all black. I stared at him for about 15 seconds in pure horror. This got my adrenaline pumping again and I ran out of the door, towards the outside toilet, only to be greeted by my mother, who looked worried as hell. After I told her what happened through uncontrollable sobs, my dad was in the driveway already parking his car. My granny was left at the hospital for some treatment. He searched the house but no one was found, so my mum told me it was just my imagination, but I know what I saw and heard. Fast forward 7 more years, I live in another house and I randomly remembered about this incident and talked to my mom about it. She seemed quite hesitant about telling me this, but at the end I convinced her to tell me. What she said gave me chills. Apparently, when I was 4 I started to stare at one particular corner in the kitchen and log like crazy. My mom asked me what's so funny, and every time I point to the same corner but never told her why it was funny. After a few months, the random giggles I let out when staring at the corner didn't stop. What made my mom lose it was the fact that I started speaking random German words that I've never heard before. We have no relatives that are German or can speak German, and I wasn't introduced to technology at that age either. My mother knew it's German because she can actually speak a little bit but never spoke it. She bribed me with candy to tell her how I learned to say the following words in German: it, help, chocolate, shower, and war. My response completely shocked her. I pointed to the same corner again and said, he taught me how. My mum kept her cool though. She asked me who I was talking about and I said, the man who makes me laugh. My mom asked me what he looked like, but I only said he looks like a shadow and that he's from Germany. When she asked where the man lived, I pointed to the 2nd floor. This all made sense because I always hated the second floor and never went up there because I felt like I was being watched. My parents took it upon themselves to Google the history of the house, and sure enough, it was built by Germans. I don't remember any of this, but my mom kept on reassuring me it happened. My father said he remembers it too, but decided not to tell me until now. I talked to the German man in the corner up until 5 years of age. I'm pretty sure you can put 2 and 2 together. But if not, the man I saw when I was 7 was the same man I talked to when I was 4. Every time I go back to visit my grandma, I always feel uneasy.
Thanks for watching. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. And please like and subscribe to help support the channel.